How real can we be? How real can we be? That's the question right now. How real can we be? Are you a real person? Do you keep it real? Are you authentic or are you fake? Come on. Are you authentic or are you fake? Answer that question honestly in the mirror to yourself. Are you authentic or are you fake? This is the time where we're being asked to get real. Black Moon Lilith Scorpio in combination with Leo Mars Transit 2025. This is the season of the inner child's outbursts. And those outbursts are the shadows through Scorpio of suppressed, truthful expressions of the self that has to make its way out into the world because it manifests unorthodox presence, unorthodox demonstration. And what is unorthodox upholds Uranus, Lord of Aquarius. And that's exactly what makes us Aquarius collectively as the people, leaning into the shadows. Without the shadows, we conform. Without the shadows, we wash, rinse, repeat, and we stay in the safe place of you can't say that or you can't do that. That is not Aquarius. Aquarius is to be unorthodox. Aquarius is to step on the outer ring of Saturn, not the inner ring. Aquarius is to test the limitations of what used to be. Aquarius is to find innovation even after creation. Aquarius is to spin the opposite direction, to say there's another way and there's a recovery of truth if we have the courage. Uranus, Lord of Aquarius, has the shock value to make that happen through the voice of the inner child, the outbursts of the inner child. We know that when Mars has limitations, Uranus has to pick up at where Mars stops. Wherever Mars stops, Uranus picks up. This is the relationship of iron and zinc. This is galvanization in action. Zinc through Uranus, iron through Mars. So where Mars leaves off with the outburst of the inner child, we have to find a way to get that outburst out through the shadow. But the only thing or the only force that's going to give us the boldness to do so is the shocking energy of Uranus. It is Uranus that's going to burst us out of the limitations of coercion, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and fear of disapproval. Uranus is going to back up the shadow. Uranus is going to shoot the shadows out of hiding. It's like a soldier that goes out and captures the kids who are, okay, think of an encampment where you have lots of kids locked up in a building and they're all trapped. Okay, these are all shadows. And you have Ogun, who is the warrior, okay, who's making the outbursts for these shadows. Ogun is saying, I'm going to advocate for you. You know, he's a warrior that's going to advocate for them getting up out of there. Okay, first of all, starts with Ogun or Mars. So Ogun comes to, he starts shooting first, okay, to get rid of the wave of enemies as he's going in there to unlock that door. Okay, he's getting in there so he can unlock the door. Ogun finds his way in through Mars, okay, to unlock the door so that these shadows can get out. Once the door is open, you have to have Shango to shoot them out. He has to go ahead of the children, you know, with the gun to shoot them out of that encampment. That's how this works. So our shadows are in prison in this little encampment. And Shango through Uranus has to shoot us out with that lightning storm, that shock value, that revelation that none can resist or deny. He has to shoot us out of that encampment. So where Mars has limitations in the outbursts and expressions that conforms, it is Uranus that's going to accelerate the situation to make sure that these voices, well, that these shadows can make their way out of imprisonment and entrapment. imprisonment and entrapment. So Mars is what's holding the expressive outburst of the shadow that we've been suppressing. It's making sure that there's enough force to get us to push those shadow expressions out. Because remember, we have to make it past the thresholds of fear inside of the self in order to get it out. Uranus is who's going to make sure that it has effect enough to change the course of social and collective standards in that environment to where it becomes acceptable by overwhelm. He's going to bring overwhelm. That's where Uranus comes in at. So it starts with Mars provoking the inner shadows to finally express their voice out, and the shadows call upon Uranus to shoot them out of there so they could be free. That is how this is going to continue to happen over the next 9 months concerning Black Moon Lilith. Where you have Scorpio in your natal birth chart, this is going to be where this encampment is at with your inner shadows. Your inner shadows are encamped at Scorpio. Okay? Generally, they have their physical outward manifestation at the 8th house. Okay? So these are the two places where these are going to be ongoing themes. These are places where you have been suppressing yourself in situations. Understand? You're going to hear me explain a little more in this discourse as we go forward how important it is for you to get natal birth chart readings for your children. Because we do not want to continue to repeat the cycles of creating shadows that are suppressed, and later on they become expressions of mischief that we aren't able to detect or get down to the bottom of. We have to let go of our arrogance and our assumptions about how well we know our children, because every child comes with very clear instructions from heaven, and that is in the natal birth chart. If you do not understand how to properly read it, don't be so arrogant as to assume that you understand that chart. Seek a professional, because this is what we don't want to keep repeating. These cycles are ending for us. Why would we continue those same cycles upon the children that are under us now? Leo Mars transit. In consideration, Black Moon Lilith transiting Scorpio over the next 9 months. This is shadow work. This is shadow work. You need to understand the assignment for 9 months is shadow work. We know that people like to pass terms around, say clickbait words, throw it out in the air and hoping that it might impress somebody, capture some attention, or get somebody to say, oh yeah, I'm doing my shadow work one day at a time, positive vibes only. Over here, infamous astrology, we don't do that. We don't do that. We make it make sense. Understanding is the best part. So we go the route of wisdom, not just to be throwing around clickbait terminology. This is shadow work. But we need to understand, what does that entail? What does that include? The first thing is to address the fact that somewhere we all want to fit in and be accepted. It's what we prefer. It gives us a sense of inclusion, camaraderie, security, and makes us feel like we're under the covering of the community or the village. The thing about fitting in is that it does go under the umbrella of security. And security is a polarity of freedom. And for that reason, if we're not careful in where we are sourcing our sense of security, we can lose our freedom. Freedom of the soul. What takes from freedom pours into security. What takes from security pours into freedom. There's a compromise that has to happen between the two, a negotiation to find that fine balance. If you want greater freedom in your life, you're going to have to sacrifice some levels of security. If you want more security in your life, you're going to have to sacrifice some capacity of freedom. We want to fit in. We're coming out of this attachment that we have to the comment section. The attachment to affiliations, the crowd, what the people will say of us or think about us if we should come from the heart. If you should have an opinion, an idea, an approach, any kind of expression that manifests through word or through actions that are not of the social agreement, that does not conform to the ideas that you've been trained to adhere to, you're looked at as an outcast, crazy, something's wrong with you. You're not with the in crowd, you're not with the cool kids. You could stand to be ridiculed, made fun of, a witch hunt, some type of persecution. This is the crisis of the modern times that we're at, is that not too many are original or authentic, and we're trying to fix that. Before that you say something or do something, there's that space in between where you say, if I should say this or if I should do this, who's going to back me? Who could I stand to lose? Will I lose money? Will I lose popularity, followers, or likes? This is the disease that we're coming out of. For every person, this is emphasized as a crisis at your Libra placement in your natal birth chart, your Libra placement, where there is codependence, emotional codependence through Cancer. So dependence and emotional codependence through Cancer in Libra, these are places in your life where you have hesitation to be authentic, you have hesitation to be real because you feel the need to fit in. It scares you that what you really want to say about it, what you really want to do about it, it leaves you outside. You're outside of the covering of the comment section. You're outside of the covering of attractive and charismatic people who would agree with you or who that you would agree with. You don't have your own mind. You don't have your own opinion. You don't have your own thought process. You're lost. Look at you. For the fear of not fitting in. With Mars at Leo now, this is going to be a problem. With Mars at Leo, the inner child, it has to express directly from the heart. But you could be the one that silences that impulse of the inner child to express itself from the heart. And out of fear, you'll block it, you'll swallow it down, you'll change up the wording, you'll adjust and modify the expression, and you'll be another fake one, standing in the crowd, safely hiding behind everyone else's echo, safely hiding You sold your soul. You sold your inner child for the fear of being rejected. Shadow work is on the horizon. We are at that front door. That is what Cancer Mars signifies, and that is what Black Moon Lilith, Scorpio transit, that's what it signifies. And what are the shadows? The shadows are expressions of the inner child that you suppressed, that you silenced, that you've put on mute, you put behind you, you turned away from it. And because you neglected those shadows, they made mischief. They made trouble, like any child would do. What happens when you neglect a child? What happens when you ignore a child? What happens when you silence children in their expression? What happens? They turn into misfits. They turn into degenerates. They get violent. They grow perversions. They become undone. They create trouble and mischief because their energy is not being nurtured. Their expressions are not being nurtured. It's not being advocated for. So they take it to wherever they can make their outbursts of expressions. And now they become juvenile delinquents, getting in all kinds of troubles. So that's where your shadows came from. When you were younger, you said, I want to do this, or I want to do that. And somebody shamed you for doing that. Somebody rejected you for doing that. You didn't get feedback. You didn't get attention for it. You didn't get praise, acknowledgement. No one nurtured what you wanted to express. It didn't gain you friends. It caused you to lose friends, lose the attention. Everyone turned their head away and looked at somebody else. The spotlight couldn't stay on you as long as you continued to do that. So as a result, you abandoned it and you studied the people around you. And you started to see what gets attention, what gets praise. And for a child, any kind of attention will do. If it's good attention or if it's bad attention, if it's positive attention or negative attention, any kind of attention will do. This is when we become attention seeking. And we do all types of dysfunctional things seeking the attention that we could not get otherwise in healthy ways, in constructive ways. It starts with something so simple as, Mommy, look, I drew a picture. Oh yeah, baby, I got something to do right now. Look, Mommy don't got time. Something as simple as, look, Daddy, I built a truck out of Legos. I built a plane out of cardboard. Yeah, that's nice, kid. Look, I'm stressed right now. Go sit down. Go watch TV. It's these type of things that started that. I want to join the military. I want to join the police force. But the fear of your parents said, oh, no, my baby ain't going to no military. My baby ain't going to no police force. You need to find something else to do. But that's what was in their soul to do, to express that, let's say, Mars-Sun conjunction. They want to join the police force to express the Mars-Sun conjunction. Or Mars in Aquarius aspect. But the parent being ignorant of who the child is, instead of pouring into it, they overshadowed the child with their own fears, projected their own fears onto the child. No, that's not safe for you. You can't do that. And we alter the direction of the destiny. This is why I say, if you have children, you need to get a natal birth chart reading for your children. because you could project your fears, you could project your own selfish interests, you could project your own guilt onto your children, and it can interfere with their natural expressions. That begins very early if they are to align with their destiny. Little boy comes and says, I want to be a boxer. Oh no, you ain't gonna have no head concussions. So he doesn't have a place to express this. You didn't give him a healthy outlet to express it by, okay, I'm gonna sign you up at the boxing gym down the street. I'm gonna find a boxing coach for you. So instead, the child goes to school and start busting people in the eye. The child figures out ways to express their self as a police officer, a fireman, a public servant through that Mars Aquarius aspect, for example. And now they find themselves being the hero in situations, and they interject into things and make mischief. They start policing people in unhealthy ways, beating up bullies. We have to be mindful of who our children are. And this was you once. Today we have natal birth chart access. So there's no excuse. And it's not for you to say, oh, I understand my children. I know my children. No, the fuck you don't. And you're arrogant to say that without confirmation of the natal birth chart. Who the fuck are you to say that? What does their chart say they are? Who does their natal birth chart say they are? Not your arrogant ass. Not you. What does their natal birth chart say they're supposed to be doing? What does their numerology say they're supposed to be doing? Because your fears and limitations can be projected onto the children. Now you have altered the course of the destiny that should have started very early on. Now it turns into shadows. Everything that they were to express out, it turns into shadows, and it makes mysteries and mischief and troubles. It makes problems as they grow, obstacles. Suppression of expressions that are supposed to be there. I don't get positive feedback as a singer. I don't get positive feedback as a dancer. I don't get positive feedback as a scientist, as an artist, as a teacher, as an engineer, as a martial artist, whatever the case may be. But I do get positive feedback for being a drug dealer. I do get positive feedback for being a rapper. I do get positive feedback from being a basketball player. I do get positive feedback for selling drugs. I do get positive feedback for being a gangster. I get positive feedback from practicing consumerism, buying all types of expensive clothes and labels. The child looks for where the positive feedback comes from. They had to abandon what was in their soul to do in order to find some type of nurturing for their soul. Because there's no nurturing for the soul available if I be myself. If I'm going to be myself, there's no nurturing available for me. This is one of the crises, for example, in African American communities. If we want to walk around with our pants on our waist, we want to be a bricklayer, a scientist, read books, catch animals, and, later on, maybe you will become a biologist. You're into things that are nerdy and brainy. You don't get attention from black girls. You don't get props from the girls. Your peers do not honor you for those things. There's a sickness in the black community. And what ends up happening is you project onto your peers those fears and limitations. You ain't gangster. You a square. You green. The rites of passage is to go to prison, to go to jail. If you've never did a bid, if you don't have any felonies, you ain't real. You're not masculine. You're not tough. You ain't gangster. This is the messaging that we put out there. And that's the only place where we can get nurturing. If we do not become that thug, if we do not become that gangster, if we don't act like criminals, we don't get play from the girls, we don't get support from our peers, we don't get positive feedback, we don't get camaraderie, we don't get inclusion, we don't get acceptance. You're left outside in the cold if you don't fit that ideal. And this is how we end up having shadows of things that you really wanted to be. You could have a child with a number 8 expression early on in life, which is enterprise and business, and there's no nurturing or positive feedback for that aspect of his inner child. So because in the family, nobody's praising those things, nobody's admiring those things, nobody is nurturing and feeding those parts of the self. When he gets to the streets and starts selling pounds and kilos of drugs, moving whole operations through the projects, moving thousands and thousands of pounds of bricks of cocaine and weed and heroin, he's still in the number 8, but in the 8 shadow. He's still being a businessman, but in the shadow. He's still operating enterprise, but in the shadow. Because when he wanted to do it in the light, nobody wanted to support him. Nobody wanted to praise him. Nobody wanted to give him acknowledgement. Little kid wanted to be a chemist. Nobody wanted to support him or praise him in being a chemist. There's no nurturing for a person who wants to be a chemist in the ghetto. So what ends up happening? He becomes a street chemist. He becomes the one who cooks up the coke. He becomes the one who cooks up the meth. He becomes the one who cooks for the trap house. He's still a chemist, but for the dark side. So this is how our talents, our gifts, our expressions begin to serve the dark side. And it starts very early. And from my own personal experience, which I know that no matter what nationality you come from, you are welcome here. I don't care what race you are or what gender, you are welcome here. But you will have to convert this to your own reality and experience. You understand? Because I know that our experiences are universal in essence, okay? But speaking from the Black experience, we don't get support and nurturing for being good people. We only get support and nurturing for being bad people. And that's the truth about the Black community. Especially little boys. When little boys want to be the good versions of themselves, Black girls are not turned on by good boys. They are not turned on by boys who walk straight. They don't like squares. They don't like proper. They don't like clean. And girls are the first ones to nurture. That's their experience of nurturing. So when the girls are not nurturing the good, they turn to the dark side so that they could get and receive that nurturing, that feedback. And then they don't know how to find the way out. This is how shadows are made. We suppress the good in us. We suppress the correctness about us. We suppress our gifts, our talents, what really makes us light up and fill up with joy. We suppress the service that we came to give to the world because there's no feedback around us that would sustain us, support us, pour into us, and nurture us if we should utilize that part of ourselves. We get rejection instead, we get abandonment, disinterest, an empty audience. I'm a heterosexual African-American male. I'm teaching astrology, and I know that my teachings are profound. They have the power to change any life. But because I'm African-American and a male, a straight male, I'm not gay. Because I'm not walking around here gay and talking like a girl, I don't get support. Because I'm not on my knees worshiping the black woman, I don't get support. I have an empty audience. That's what comes with it. But I refuse to sell my soul for acceptance. I refuse to sell my soul to fit in. Because what I do know is that God has a plan for me if I stay true. That's what I do know. And I'm going to show and prove that to every person. There's a plan for me. That's what I know. And all I got to do is be true to who I am. Growing up when you're young and black, you're not allowed to be good. And it's especially because your peers will make fun of you. The girls will reject you. So this is where our shadows begin in life. What happens when you have a calling and the family that you're born into has a narrow mindset? They don't have the expansive mindset to understand who was born, who's in their midst, and what they should be nurturing. What if you were a healer, doctor, scientist, teacher, engineer, whatever, but the family is not used to that? They're not inclined to it. It doesn't entertain them. So there's nobody in the family to really concentrate and say, hold up, we need to start early with nurturing this attribute in this child. We need to start early with nurturing this thing about this child. We need to praise them every time they do it. We need to feed their soul every time they're doing it. We need to instigate their connection to this expression. We need to pour into it. But instead, we walk around consumed in ourselves and we overlook what the children really need. We overlook it. Every child was born on a particular day of the month. And that lets you know right there what type of expression they have. If your child was born on the 4th, you need to surround them with material to see what they do with it. Metal, wood, leather, textiles of all kinds, screws, bolts, hammers and drills, boxes, mathematics. You have to instigate what the soul is inclined to. You have to nurture it. If the child has a number 8 in the day that they were born, you have to instigate their ability to troubleshoot, to process challenging situation circumstances. You have to praise them and worship them when they remain calm in difficult situations, and when their sister's crying or their brother is crying and they say, hey, stop crying, calm down, I got it. You need to acknowledge that they did that so that you can instigate their connection to that energy. When you see a child is born with the number 2 expression, when they show up as comforters and nurturers and healers, you have to instigate it, you have to praise it, you have to water it, you have to feed it. Our ignorance leaves shadows behind. It causes the children to suppress shadows because you don't want to nurture, because you're too fucking ignorant to recognize what you need to nurture about your child. You are ignorant about your own children. This is why it's not just about you. You should be getting readings for your children on a regular. Natal birth chart to understand their destiny so that you can help them towards their destiny, not leave them hanging, suppressing all kinds of shadows because your arrogant ass wants to assume that you know your children, but you don't. You don't. They're in number 7. They don't like being around a lot of people. They always like playing by themselves. They're unorganized. They're not good at following instructions. You think something's wrong with them. No. They're figuring out how to turn their impulses into realities. That's Pisces. That's Neptune. To figuring out, what does this mean, these impulses that I have inside of myself? Oh, I'm supposed to be creating something, but I have no idea what. The natural inclination to be in isolation is their ability to channel those impulses into ideas or ideals. So you're supposed to instigate that. Introduce them to concepts, pictures, figures, images, colors. You have to prime their imagination. You're treating one child like the other, and they're not the same. What I'm saying is that this begins very early on. And getting natal birth chart readings for your children is what allows you to identify exactly what it is that you need to pour into, focus on, and prepare them for. But you can't trust the arrogance of your own opinions. You can't trust the arrogance of your own assumptions about your children. Every child was born with very specific instructions as to what they're supposed to be doing here in this earth, and it is clarified through the natal birth chart. But you have to understand how to read the natal birth chart. You have to understand it. A failure to do that is to set them up for suppression of those impulses and expressions of the inner child, and then it becomes shadows. And the shadows make mischief. Instead of doing what it was called to do at the point of fate or north node, they create trouble and mischief. Because overall, the shadows are seeking for attention that it could not otherwise get. And when we seek for attention in desperate ways, it can show up in behaviors that are self-destructive, self-compromising, questionable, shameful, and especially perverse. All kinds of perversions. This is how this begins. It's the case for every one of us. But what lasts a long time is a fear of not fitting in. It's cold, it's uncomfortable, it's isolating when you get rejected for being exactly who you are. This is what we're reconciling with the transit of Black Moon Lilith through Scorpio. The shadow work. What have you been suppressing inside of yourself because of the fear of not fitting in? When there's a headline, a world event going on, and you have an opinion about it, where did you get your opinion from? Did you wait to see what rappers have to say about it? What celebrities have to say? What the pretty girl says on the camera, on Instagram, snatching at the screen? What the TikTok videos say? Or do you know how to come to your own conclusions through critical thought? You have to have an identity to come from critical thought. And that's what most people in this day and time lack. Identity. So you do what everybody else is doing. People who you have identified with, that's what you do. That's how you think. That's how you conclude. That's a crisis. It's something that we have to undo. What can we do about this? You and I, we have the advantage. The natal birth chart reading for the child. Understanding the numerological expression. Understanding the life path and the heart soul urge value number. Understanding where it is to be applied to in life. The north and south node. The 12th house story. And how it leads into the manifestation of the personality in the first house, the reality of the physical realm. What they're supposed to do with it. The sun placement. These things are supposed to be known and understood so that you can pour into, nurture, assist their purpose, not your own ideals, not your own perversions and limitations and fears projected onto them. Don't you love your children enough not to subject them to that? Or are you going to be selfish enough and arrogant enough to assume that you're not doing it? Now, shadows can have you ride the fence. Shadows can have you ride the fence, where you would say yes and no. Literally. You will literally say yes and no. Everything that you will have to say about something is both answers. You can't pick a side. You can't pick a position. You're always confused about what you think of something or what you believe of something. This essentially comes back to the lack of identity. Because you don't have identity, you cannot be decisive. When we have identity, it is upheld by the second house, which is your values, your ethos, your personal beliefs. It precedes how you imply and infer at the third house. It precedes that. But lacking identity, you lack a place to found your views. And from that, you cannot think critically about any situation. You have lost access to critical thought. There's no basis for critical thought. So you ride the fence until you find out who you think is winning the argument. And whoever you think or perceive is winning the argument, that's the position you will go with. But what happens when we misunderstand winning for clout? What happens when we misunderstand winning for validation and popularity? Popularity does not mean win. It does not mean victory. Clout does not mean victory. You're looking at the point of who has the most views, who has the most followers, who's the most attractive, who's the most charismatic, who makes people laugh, who's popular. And that automatically becomes who you side your position or your theory with, giving no critical thought. You wait for the philosophy of the crowd because your ninth house is inaccessible to you. You have to have an identity to access your ninth house of philosophy and higher thought, the higher self. You can't get there without identity. So your slogans, your phrases and catchlines and punchlines, it becomes Instagram quotes. Quotes of songs and rap songs and music that you've heard. You have no original thought. You quote celebrities. You quote rappers. You quote music. You quote movies. You quote what is popular being said and passed around. Catchphrases. Whatever the lingo is of the modern time. That's what's always coming out your mouth. You always speak it in vernacular and lingo because you don't have original thought. Vernacular and lingo is all you got. Because you know that if I use this punchline that's passing around Instagram and TikTok, people are emotionally attached to such phrases. And it wins you clout. It causes you to be able to make somebody laugh. Make somebody say, oh, yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to side with that. I'm going to like that. I'm going to verify that. I'm going to validate that. People hide behind these things. It's like the Instagram girl who her objective is to get attention. She just got her hair done. She just put all that makeup on, looking like a tranny. And she gets on there quoting some dumbass bird brain shit. Yeah, you just gotta stay positive. Don't let nobody get under your skin. Positive vibes only, you know. Positive vibes only. Some bird brain babble. Yeah, you gotta worry about your own happiness. You gotta think about your own happiness. If somebody's not making you happy, you only got one life to live. These are the people who take the words of Drake, who take the words of Future, who take the words of Kendrick Lamar, who take the words of uh, uh, Beyonce, who take the words of rappers and singers, and that's the only language they know how to speak. The fake and the phony. Are your opinions, views, and perceptions manufactured by media or your fear of rejection? Did you say that because you're afraid of being rejected? Did you say that because that's what you hear as a clickbait or the click words, the click phrases of media? Do you know how to form your own thought? Do you have the ability to practice critical thought? And that begins with having identity, and that begins with having a healthy connection to your second house, your own value, your own ethos, your own value system and ethos, a healthy self-esteem. Knowing the difference between you and others. There's attachment that we have developed that puts us in a crisis. I have to ride the wave of the culture. I have to fit in the culture at all times. I have to be with the culture at all times. I have to be validated by the culture at all times. This is the crisis, and this is why nobody is being their self. Validation is addictive. Validation is addictive. It starts when you're a baby. It starts when you're a child. It starts in adolescence. It starts very young. That addiction to validation. That dopamine hit. And it's a crisis with the second house. You got low self-esteem, so you're always in search of validation. You lack the ability to produce true and actual value within the being, within the identity. So you're always seeking for validation outside of yourself. You're unhappy if you don't get validation. You're in a crisis with your self-esteem if you do not get validation. You hate yourself if you can't get validation. You're physically sick if you can't get validation. Clout and validation, constantly chasing clout and validation. When you have an addiction to clout and validation, you do not have a truthful or sincere opinion, position, or thought. Everything you say and everything you think is a lie. Because everything you say and everything you think, everything you do is to win another hit of validation. It's to get a fix of your addiction. The way that you think, the way that you judge, the way that you phrase your communications, your opinions, your views, your perceptions, how you judge. It all becomes a strategy to win more validation. A strategy to reaffirm favor with the people. This is the opposite direction of where we're going. We're learning to come out of this state of addiction. Come out of it. The need to have people validate who you are, what you are. To have people to validate how you feel about yourself, what you think of yourself. That is a crisis with the second house. A crisis with the second house, always seeking validation. You are not educated in how to produce actual value to where you can respect yourself, to where you can value and cherish yourself, because you have not produced or created anything within the self or about the self that you can respect. You have not created anything in the self or about the self that allows you to be content with the value that you've arrived at, what you have produced or made of yourself. So you pack all kinds of things on the outside of the self to make up for the lack on the inside of the self. That's a crisis. How many hours do you spend in the mirror? How much money do you spend on buying things to put on your face, on your body, to feel valuable? That is a self-esteem crisis. A person who walks around with labels of expensive things, all kinds of colors and hairstyles that cost thousands of dollars, all this expensive stuff, that's a person with very low self-esteem. The car you drive, the house you live in, it breaks the bank to where you could barely pull it off without getting all kinds of bank loans and credit debt. You have a self-esteem crisis. And you're trying to compensate for that through buying things, purchasing things, and putting them on your body. This gets projected outwards. When you are in that crisis, you judge others the same way. So if somebody don't have all kind of expensive stuff on, fancy outfits, labels, you cut them off. You write them off. You reject them. Because the same way that you judge yourself is how you judge others. How many people out there watch the show Pop the Balloon, right? The Pop the Balloon show. It's a great show. It's revealing. It tells us where we're at. You will have men up there who are well accomplished, great character, great attitude, personality, and whatever else going on. But because their shoes are not a certain way, because their haircut is a certain way, because their outfit is a certain way, these females will reject them. That's projection. It shows where they're at inside their self. They reject their self for not having those things. They reject their self if they don't have a certain hairstyle. They reject their self if they don't have certain labels. They reject their self if their clothes don't look a certain way. So they reject others for the same reason. That's all that shows. They have low self-esteem. Therefore, it gets projected onto the other person. It's a mirror. Females with low self-esteem reject people for such ridiculous reasons. They have low self-esteem. It's called being superficial. Superficiality. Black Moon Lilith through Scorpio is bringing the shadows out so that we can incorporate an authentic expression of the self that challenges the superficiality of the self, those illusions. It challenges it. Do you have the courage for it? Why is validation so important? Now, you could mention in the chat, if you remember me speaking about this, but the number 9 at the South Node Virgo, and if anything you don't know what I'm saying, ask the question in the comment section, please. Ask the question. The number 9 expression at the South Node Virgo is working against the detriment of Venus. And as I explained before, and again, if you can remember me saying this, please let me know, support me, and let me know you remember, that I said this, that 9 will start working against the detriment of Venus. We're in a detriment of Venus when we need validation and clout from the comment section and from the feedback that we get as a result of being, obsessive consumers in this society with buying labels, and expensive things to feel valuable. Recently, what has manifested from that number 9 is, Trump's tariffs on China starting at 125%, going all the way up to 245%. It caused a reaction from China to expose these high-end fashion labels such as Louis Vuitton and, many other high-end fashion European labels, that many of these things were being manufactured in China. So what it exposes is that It's all in our head that we're making up superficial routes to self-esteem, superficial routes to value of ourself. And all of our hiding places are going to be removed. That's another hiding place that's removed by the number 9 vibration that's working against the detriment of Venus. Venus rules Taurus. Taurus rules the second house of what we value and how we value and what our values are. It rules our self-esteem at the second house, the stability of our self-esteem. So that's the 9 that's correcting the Venus shadow impulse. It's working against it. It's dispelling the illusions and the hiding places of the ego. Those hiding places where I'm going to hide behind these labels. I'm going to hide behind European fashions. I'm going to hide behind all this expensive stuff that I buy to feel valuable, to feel important, to feel elite, to feel high class, to feel like I can look down on another person and say, I'm up here and you're down there. Now it's exposed that this you're just a dummy that paid way too much money for something that wasn't even worth that. That's all it's exposing. You're a gullible dummy that blew the bank on something that was only worth a fraction of the price of the cost that you paid for it. So it also exposes your ignorance on what value really is. Because real value goes through Taurus. And Taurus is about quality, not quantity. It's about quality. But the vanity that we're expressing for validation is about who looks rich, who looks successful, who looks affluent, who has the appearance of such. But Taurus emphasizes on quality. If you're going to spend that much money on something, what does it do? What type of material is it made for? What happens if it's in freezing temperatures? What happens if it's in real hot temperatures? Is it, does it have the sweat textile? Where it dries really fast if you sweat in it. Will it age and will it increase in value as it ages, such as leathers or canvas, coats, pants, or other materials? That's looking at actual value of something, not the vanity of a thing. So one more hiding place just got exposed. People can no longer hide behind labels because that just got exposed. So when these rappers and musicians and celebrities are up here, I got Louis Vuitton this, I got Gucci this, Prada that, all these other labels. What did that do to the consciousness of the people? It awakened them. It exposed some. And it caused the 9 to repel the detriment of Venus. The number 9 is the return to sincerity in the self. It's a return to truth in the self, authenticity in the self. That's the number 9 vibration. It's completion. And it works against the superficiality of Venus. Now, your shadows are magnificent expressions of the inner child that you hid away from rejection. You hid away from abandonment. You hid it away from disapproval and disinterest of others. That's your shadows. And during the Black Moon Lilith through Scorpio transit of 9 months, we have a single focus to identify those shadows and take command of those shadows and to give them the right to take full expression in the outer being. We have to revive them, restore them, and nurture them so that they can have illumination and no longer work mischief. We have work to do. Where are your shadows inside of yourself? Magnificent expressions of the self that you kept hidden away because people rejected you for it. You became less popular. You became isolated. Nobody liked you for it. You didn't get praise for it. But you decided that it's no longer relevant because you don't get nurturing, you don't get validation in return for those expressions. That Mars and Leo, it's an outburst of the inner child. That's what the Mars-Leo combination is. It is the inner child making outbursts. And those outbursts are going to be the voices of the shadows, because the shadows are the expressions of the inner child. But they are the expressions of the inner child that you have suppressed because you sold the inner child's expressions in order to fit in order to go somewhere and get love from someone or validation from someone for being someone that you're not. That's what that was all about. But now it's time to bring those shadows out and incorporate them in a healthy and constructive application. The Leo Mars transit, it's a fight to defend, justify, and advocate for the fullest expression of the inner child. The fullest expression. You will fight for this. And you made a promise to your inner child. You made a bond with your inner child. You made a new connection with your inner child. You restored it during the Cancer Mars retrograde transit. You have accomplished that. So now the inner child wants to start expressing itself. And is going to do so boldly through Leo. The worst thing that you can do is silence that inner child. Is to deny the inner child its fullest expression. And it must come with drama. What I mean by drama is Leo. Leo is drama. You have to allow drama to go with that inner child. The inner child is going to pull directly off the shadows, not any other forces. Is going to pull off of those shadows because the shadows are his voices. The shadows are her voices. And you must not deny the inner child those expressions. I cannot emphasize it enough. You will fight to defend it, justify it, and advocate for those expressions. And you're going to relive the shame. You're going to relive the fear of being rejected, of being betrayed, of being abandoned, of being disliked, of nobody liking what you're expressing, nobody being interested or engaged. You are going to go through it again. And you have to go through it because you have to learn to value your inner child's expressions more than you value the feedback. The feedback will come. And the feedback in and of itself is going to come directly from the inner child to you. And that's healing. That's the generation of inner happiness. Contentment with the self, rest with the self, peace with the self. You falling in love with what you do. Not waiting to fall in love with what you do, waiting until other people praise it, waiting until other people approve it. I show up here every single day. I show up here consistently. I produce these videos, I produce this content because this is what my inner child wants to do. This is my inner child's expression. This is my calling. This is what God wants me to do. This is my service to the world. This is also my service to my inner child. I will not deny my inner child what he wants. I show up to an empty audience every time I produce a video, an empty audience. No comments, no likes, except every now and then, the same 3 or 5 people. I face rejection, the disinterest of the people. If I put my self-esteem in people, if I put my work on the outcome or results or feedback that I get from the people, I would never be here. So let me be an example of that. It's not about the feedback you get. from the audience, from the people. It's about the feedback that you get from the inner child, that you consistently show up for yourself. What I am showing, proving, is how you love yourself, how you respect yourself, how you stay true to yourself. I'm showing and proving it. You don't see me up here with clout, all kinds of comments in a section, all types of support. People can hardly even hit the like button. Share the material. I don't get those things. But yet, there's a reason I come here every time. I'm consistent. Because I learned those were my shadows. I say things that people don't like. I say things that people unsubscribe. Once they hear me say certain things, they unsubscribe. Once they hear me talk about certain things, they unsubscribe. They leave. They get silent. They say, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to hear that. So am I going to abandon what my inner child wants to express and do because I'm not getting the feedback that I prefer? Because the people are showing me disinterest? No, that's not a reason to stop being who you are. It is not a reason. It's not an excuse to stop being who you are. You got to be true to who you are. I'm going to be true to who I am. I will die on this rock being true to who I am. So I'm showing and proving all that I'm saying. I'm living it. I'm being it. I'm doing it. I'm right here. Big mistake that we continue to make is we imprison the inner child. We mute the inner child because we want to avoid rejection. You know what you're really about. You know what you love. You know what makes you happy. You know what puts peace inside of your soul. But you don't want to be that person, and you don't want to do that because it don't come with clout, validation. It don't come with hand claps. It don't come with all the pretty girls looking at you. It don't come with all of that. It don't come with a check. It don't come with attention. It don't come with all kinds of money and deals. So you abandon it. You don't show up for it. We're being asked to do the exact opposite. It's counterintuitive because we've been conditioned to go against ourselves. We've been conditioned to reject who we really are. But this is a version of the story where we have to live out an authentic people, an authentic society, an authentic expression of the people. All of our shadows were locked away with our inner child. They are the literal expressions of the inner child that we became ashamed of. Imagine that. Your inner child has expressions and you abandoned him or her. You walked away. You ignored it because it embarrassed you. You became ashamed of it. You felt insulted and it hit your self-esteem so hard to where you never wanted to pick it up again. But is it about you? No, it's not. You have to live out what the inner child is guiding you to do. And let the chips fall where they may. Whatever the consequences are is the consequences, but you must be true to yourself. You must be true to self. What happened when on the Sabbath, it was on the Sabbath, Jesus had ordered for the gathering of ears of corn. And the people questioned Jesus and they said, it's the Sabbath. Why are you contradicting the law of the Sabbath? Right? That's a shadow. And what Jesus was showing them is that the law is written on the heart. The law is written on the heart. Let common sense be my guide. The people are hungry, so I'm going to feed the people. That is righteousness. Righteousness is not what is not what is written. Righteousness is what is done. So he was demonstrating what righteousness is. It was his shadows that made that expression. And the shadow will always contradict the common agreement of complacency, the limitations of popular belief, the limitations of dogmatism, dogmatic views. When the prostitute woman was being stoned by the people, they gathered around in a witch hunt. And what did Jesus say to the people? Ye who is without sin, cast the first stone. He exposed all of them. First of all, every last one of y'all niggas hit that. But you out here ready to throw a stone at her, but everyone, all of y'all was creeping with it at night. But yet you out here raising a stone. So whoever didn't hit that, throw the first stone. Yeah, okay, just as I thought. So our shadow, it says and it does what everybody knows is to be said or to be done. But they tremble to say it or do it. They're scared to say it or do it. That's how you know it's a shadow. That's what shadows do. Shadows say what you're thinking. Shadows do what you want to do, but you're too scared to do it. That's a shadow. Shadow restores the infinite authority of truth. Because regardless of how the people's compliance have went astray, the shadow will always bring it back to origin. The shadow questions the perversion of the mind. How obscured we become when we stray from the truth. The shadow returns it. When I say something, for example, if I was to say to you, as a man, why would you tell a woman that you're going to be monogamous to her? Why would you agree to monogamy and you know that that's not in your nature to be monogamous? Why would you do that? You know you're lying. You're only agreeing to monogamy because you know that if you say anything other than that, she's going to decide not to talk to you. You're going to lose your shot with her. But you know you're not monogamous, instead of being honest about what you really are. It sounds crazy for me to say that. People are appalled that I would say something like that. People are appalled. But who's really being exposed? Am I being exposed in saying that? Or are you being exposed in me saying that? Because which one is the truth? Which one is the truth? The fact that men are coerced into monogamy, even though it is not their nature, it is not their desire, it is not who they are, it is not what they want to be, it is not what they want to do. But women have conditioned you so well through fear to accept it. You accept monogamy out of fear of being rejected. You fear being rejected, so you lie to yourself and lie to others and say you're monogamous, and you know you're not. You know you don't just want one woman. You know that you cannot endure having just one woman. You know that. You a liar. But because you've been conditioned to accept that idea, when someone comes to restore the truth of your nature by proposing the thought that you think, but you're scared to think it out loud, you're scared to say it out loud, that's called a shadow. So when I say, why would you do something crazy like that? Like tell a woman, yeah, I'm going to be monogamous. We're going to be monogamous. And you know that that's not who you are. Why don't you lead with who you really are? No, I'm not going to be monogamous. I'm going to have 2 women or 3 women or 4. And if that's not for you, fine. That's okay. But I have to put you on notice on what I'm doing here. So who's a liar and who's a liar and who's being truthful? The shadow is always truthful. The shadow doesn't lie. That's the thing about the shadow. It is truth. It comes from Scorpio. Scorpio don't lie. Scorpio tell the truth. Scorpio will die before they lie. That's why shadows are in Scorpio. Because Scorpio is the keeper of truth that is suppressed. Scorpio is the keeper of truth that has fallen into the underworld or the underground, and Pluto recovers that truth. So when you recover shadows, you recover the truth that was suppressed out of fear, truth that was suppressed out of guilt and shame. Men were shamed into accepting monogamy. Every last one of you men out there that's listening right now, if you have a woman and you love her, you still want another woman. It has nothing to do with your love for that woman. I understand that. You love her, you care for her, you respect her and everything else, but you still want another woman. But you're too scared to admit that. You're too scared to say it out loud. You shook. So that fear has you to suppress your own nature. You suppress what's true about you. And what happens? The shadow now takes you on mischief because you suppressed it. And where does the shadow come out at? You cheating on a girl. Now you're next door cheating. Now you're down the street cheating. That's your shadow making its expression through dysfunction. It makes its expression through mischief because you suppressed it instead of having the courage to bring the truth of the self out into the open. This is where some of our curses, our vices, our troubles are coming from, because we have so much truth about ourselves that's suppressed because of fear. We're afraid of the consequences of being honest about ourselves, of being truthful about ourselves. We're hiding. We are hiding. Our inner shadows haunt our inner child with the very fears and guilt behind our self-suppression. It haunts us. It haunts us. You know you're not being true to yourself. But for whatever the reason, just like I mentioned, coercion and such, you suppress what is really true about the self, and it haunts you. And that fear and that haunting, it comes out in resentment. You resent people who are doing it. You resent people who are being it. You resent people who do say what you're scared to say. You resent people who do what you really want to do. You resent it. And what it looks like is you attacking those same people for living the same way that you really want to. You see somebody got the guts to have 2 women or 3 women or 4. And you stuck with one woman who you mad that you are limited to. And you see a man in his full expression of that, and you start bombing on that man. Oh, who does he think he is? He ain't got enough money for that. Oh, he just a womanizer. Oh, look at him. Yeah, he just used women. Yeah, I can't understand it. I can't understand dudes like that. You hating on this nigga because you ain't got the guts to be who you want to be. So now you hating on that person. That's your shadows haunting you. You're scared of your woman. You're scared of your wife. You're scared of your girlfriend. And that's why you're in a monogamous situation right now. That's why you're sitting there like little doggy wagging your tail when you see another woman in secret. That's why you cheating on your girl, because you don't have the guts to be who you want to be. And you hate on the one who does. That's what causes you to be a secret hater, a secret enemy of other people. You don't have the guts to be who you want to be. The shadows are suppressed, and it's making you so resentful inside of yourself. We sell the soul or the inner child to conform, avoid rejection, or to obtain superficial ambitions such as lust for career or relationships or addictions. Look at American women. They were born, engineered, and designed for victory in the 4th house. But instead, they envy men. They envy Adam. And they fight through feminism to find victory in the 10th house. They want to compete with Adam. They want to compete with man. They're jealous and envious of men. This is the truth of American women. They envy men. They wish they were men. They wish they had our destiny. So they suppress what is natural about themselves. Their inner child wants them to live out that 4th house, to fulfill that 4th house. But through fear of rejection of the sisterhood, rejection of the popular society, rejection of the movements of liberalism and feminism, not having inclusion in that false sense of security, of infrastructure, they pursue things that are not even of their nature. Things that are futile to happiness for themselves. No woman finds happiness in career ambitions. No woman does. No woman finds fulfillment in career ambitions. She is not built for the 10th house. That is not who she is. She has the freedom to pursue it, but it will never give her happiness. So the inner child shadows are suppressed because there's no expression for the woman in the 10th house. There's no expression for womanhood at the 10th house, not in a worldly sense of career pursuit ambitions. So she has to convert her inner child's expressions into shadows in order to suppress it enough to put on a superficial image of herself. And what happens when those shadows get suppressed? They make mischief. And what form do those shadows make mischief? Then you end up walking around in your high heels. You're overpaid, expensive Louis Vuittons and labels and high-end fashion. You're overpaid, big 5-bedroom houses and lines of credit and debt that you done built up for yourself because you are in competition with every female in the world. The insecurity abounds. And you start projecting the suppression that's within you of those shadows. And what that starts to look like is you lose logic and critical thought. And the inner child's shadows start taking over. You start looking for a daddy in every person. Every person got to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have to have the capacity to make up for the father that you never had. They have to have the capacity to care for you as some damsel in distress, but yet in contradiction, you want to express yourself as this ambitious, powerful woman who's equal to a man, but yet in contradiction, you want to be taken care of as a helpless, defenseless damsel in distress, a soft woman who is to be guarded and protected in the home. She can't make up her mind. But those shadows are pushing through as entitlement. Entitlements of who she really wants to be. But the entitlements are in contradiction to who she's expressing herself as. I want to feel entitled to be financed 100% in my life. I don't want to have to work. I don't want to have to pay my own bills. I don't want to have to pay the tab at dinner or the date. I don't want no 50-50. I don't want no man who's working a 9-to-5. Why? Because she's making room. She wants to make room for the shadows, the mischief of the shadows to have their place of expression in her identity. But those shadows has already been overcome by her contradiction of ambitions in life, which is geared toward her envy of males and her secret competition with her female counterparts. So there's a complex shadow crisis with females in American society. She has layers and layers packed down of shadows that want to express herself through the sincere being of the feminine. But she has already stuffed it with superficial expressions of the masculine within the self. So she's confused. The Leo Mars outbursts of the inner child shadows at Scorpio, Black Moon Lilith. It makes lightning storms as shocking Uranus revelations. Okay, so how does this come together? Leo Mars transit is going to be a 2-month transit of the inner child having outbursts in which it is going to scream from the shadow. It's not going to scream necessarily from the heart solely. It's going to scream from the shadows of the heart. This is very important for you to understand. That Mars in Leo is specifically going to cause the voices of the shadows and the actions of the shadows to be fully and dramatically expressed as outbursts. Okay? Our shadows are going to make outbursts. What the Mars is going to provoke is coming from Scorpio, Mars rules Scorpio as well as Aries, okay? At Aries, it is to seed a new identity or to seed the original identity, okay? Neptune at Aries is carrying the essence of what has been dissolved from the past life that we're just coming out of. It still has that essence. Whatever form that we were living out inauthentically, in a fake sense, in an inauthentic or insincere sense, it has dissolved those forms and it has kept the essence of the heart, soul, urge expression. That is the numerical value of the day of month that you were born. So that numerical value is still held in Neptune. And it's in Aries so that it could be reformed in an authentic version or expression of the self that is more aligned with the authentic identity based on Aries, ruler of the first house. It's the shadows that's going to bring in the authenticity. It's the shadows that's going to make sure that the absolute truth of the self is informing this expression. So it's the shadows that's going to determine how we utilize the Aries Neptune transit in reforming a version of the self that is purely authentic. Expressing ourselves without fear of consequence, without fear of rejection. It is the Leo Mars that pulls off of Scorpio, one of its territories, that provokes the shadows to speak. It provokes the shadows to act. When the shadow speaks, you're going to feel fearful of being rejected for that speech. When the shadow acts, you're going to feel fearful of being rejected for those actions. But those words and those actions of the shadow are deep truths, because what is in Scorpio are deep truths that Pluto is going to recover. Where is Pluto? In Aquarius. What is Aquarius? It is the futuristic expressions or versions of ourself in our power dynamics, we the people. It is where we are the versions of ourselves that brings the water to the situation, which is wisdom. Acting through wisdom and truth and sincerity. Where does Uranus come in at this? When the inner child speaks and acts, it speaks and acts through lightning bolts. Lightning bolts of who? Shango or Uranus. That is light of revelation. The light of revelation means it's going to be shocking words of truth, shocking actions of truth that causes lightning storms when the shadows are in motion. So when your shadows are in motion, it's going to cause Uranus to throw lightning bolts of shocking revelations and truth, epiphanies, realizations, where you say something or you do something that everyone around you is afraid to say or do, even though they know inside of themselves it is what should be said and what should be done. So when you do it, it is a lightning bolt that gives revelation to everyone hearing and seeing what you're doing through the shadow. And that then becomes the new standard or norm that people express themselves to. Now there's an innovation of the consciousness where no permission was required to be authentic. Understand?